I stopped breathing the moment she grabbed my wrist. It was 2:30 in the morning, the hospital corridor dark and quiet, and I had just reached for the cup of water sitting on my bedside table. The night nurse stepped out of the shadows so fast I didn't even hear her coming. Her hand closed around my arm before the cup touched my lips, and she leaned in close enough that I could feel her breath against my ear. "Don't drink that," she whispered, "and please don't react. Just set it back down like nothing happened." I looked at her. She was young, maybe 30, with steady brown eyes that told me she was not confused about which room she was in. I set the cup down. She straightened up, checked the hallway over her shoulder, and said in a normal voice, "Just doing my rounds, Mr. Calloway. How's the pain tonight?" She was performing for anyone who might be watching. My heart was already moving too fast. I told her the pain was fine. She smiled, wrote something in my chart, and walked out. I did not sleep for the rest of that night. 3 days earlier, I had gone in for a routine hip replacement. 65 years old, 32 years of standing on concrete floors as a structural engineer, and my right hip had finally had enough. My doctor called it a common procedure. He said I would be walking without a cane by the end of the month. My wife, Carol, had cried a little when they wheeled me back, not from fear but from relief that I had finally stopped refusing to do anything about the pain. She had been after me for 2 years. Carol and I had been married 41 years. We had built a life the slow, honest way, a house in Dayton, Ohio, savings we had never touched recklessly, a retirement that was comfortable without being flashy. When our daughter was born, we thought we were the luckiest people alive. We raised her with everything we had: good schools, family vacations, college paid in full. When she married her husband 6 years ago, I stood at the front of that church and felt something I can only describe as complete. I am telling you all of this because I need you to understand what the word daughter meant to me before any of this happened. She had arrived at the hospital within an hour of my surgery. She brought flowers, a bag of things Carol might need if she stayed too long, and a smile I had seen on her face since she was 7 years old. She fussed over my blanket. She told the nurses her cell number in case anything changed overnight. She sat beside Carol and held her hand. Her husband came later that evening, shook my hand, asked about the surgeon, said all the right things. I was groggy from anesthesia and grateful, and I thought, not for the first time, that whatever mistakes I had made as a father, I had done something right. My son-in-law was the one who had suggested the private room. He had called the hospital before my admission and arranged an upgrade, said it was his and my daughter's gift to me. "Better rest, more privacy," he said. At the time, I thanked him. I remember telling Carol that I had been too hard on him in the early years of their marriage, that I needed to give the man more credit. I think about that now, and I cannot fully describe what the feeling is. On the second day, my daughter brought a smoothie from the place I liked on 5th Street, mango and pineapple. She said she had driven 20 minutes out of her way to get it. I drank the whole thing and told her it was the best thing I had tasted since before the surgery. She watched me drink it with an expression I can only describe now as careful. That night I felt nauseated. The nurse on duty chalked it up to residual anesthesia and post-surgical medication. My body adjusting. "Common," she said. I believed her. On the third night, Carol had gone home to sleep in a real bed for the first time since the surgery. My daughter had insisted. She said she would stay with me, that Carol needed rest. Carol had protested, but my daughter had that gentle, firm way about her that she had inherited directly from her mother, and eventually Carol went. My daughter stayed until around 9 in the evening. She refilled my water cup from the pitcher on the counter, kissed my forehead, said she would be back first thing in the morning. I told her I loved her. She said she loved me too. By 2:30 in the morning, I was awake and thirsty, and a night nurse I had not seen before was standing in the dark telling me not to drink. Her name was Denise. She had been on the floor for 4 nights, running a double shift, and on the first night, she had noticed something that had taken her 2 days to decide what to do with. She came to me on the third night because she said she could not wait any longer. She came back to my room at 3 in the morning when the floor supervisor had gone on break. She sat in the chair beside my bed and spoke quietly and quickly and did not soften a single thing she told me. She had seen my daughter at the nurse's station on my first night during a shift change when the floor was briefly unattended. My daughter had been at the counter near the medication records. Denise had not thought much of it at the time. Family members sometimes wandered when they were anxious. But on the second night, She had noticed my daughter near my room for longer than seemed normal after visiting hours. And when Denise had done her rounds, she had found the water pitcher on my table had been moved from where she had left it. She had flagged it to the charge nurse. The charge nurse had dismissed it, but Denise had pulled my lab work from the previous day and noticed something off in my blood work, an anomaly she said she was not qualified to officially interpret, but that she had seen once before in a patient who had been unknowingly given something they should not have had. She had gone to hospital security that afternoon. They had contacted someone. She did not tell me who. What she told me was that the water cup on my table that night had not come from the standard hospital supply. I sat with that for a long moment. I asked her if she was certain. She looked at me with those steady eyes and said she would not be sitting in that chair at 3 in the morning if she was not. I asked her what I was supposed to do. She said, "For right now, nothing. You don't know anything. When your daughter arrives tomorrow morning, you are recovering and grateful and everything is normal. Can you do that?" I told her I had been a father for 38 years and a husband for 41, and I had learned to keep my face still when my heart was not. She nodded and said that was exactly what was needed. She left. I lay in the dark and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about my daughter's face when she kissed my forehead. I thought about the smoothie from 5th Street. I thought about my son-in-law shaking my hand and asking about the surgeon. I did not sleep, but I kept my face still. My daughter arrived at 8:15 the next morning with coffee and a breakfast sandwich from the place near her house. She was cheerful and attentive, and she straightened my pillow and asked how I had slept. I told her better than the night before. She looked pleased. Her husband came an hour later, and they sat on either side of my bed, and we talked about my recovery timeline and whether Carol and I should come stay with them for the first 2 weeks after discharge, since their house had a guest room on the ground floor and no stairs. I said that sounded like a wonderful idea. My son-in-law smiled and said they had already started getting the room ready. At 11 o'clock, 2 men I had never seen came into my room and introduced themselves as federal investigators. My daughter stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. Her husband went completely still. One of the investigators asked my daughter and son-in-law to step outside with them. My daughter looked at me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life. It was not guilt, exactly. It was something more complicated than guilt. It was the look of someone who had believed they had thought of everything, standing in front of the one thing they had not. I did not say anything. I kept my face still. They were outside for a long time. What came out over the following days was this. My son-in-law had been in serious financial trouble for nearly 2 years. A failed business venture, debts he had hidden from my daughter initially, and then, at some point, involved her in. They had maxed out their credit, borrowed against their house, and were behind on payments they could not catch up on. My wife and I had a life insurance policy, a retirement account, and a paid-off house worth $400,000 in the current market. My son-in-law had done the math. He had, according to investigators, initiated the conversation about what that math meant. The substance in my water was not immediately lethal. It was not meant to look sudden. It was meant to look like surgical complications. A body already weakened, already under the stress of a procedure, under medication that would make additional blood work harder to interpret cleanly. Slow. Careful. The kind of thing that would have been grieved over and not examined too closely. My daughter had access to the substance through a contact her husband had found. She had added it to my water twice before Denise flagged the blood work. I am 65 years old, and I lay in a hospital bed, and I tried to understand how the child I had held in my arms the day she was born had gotten to a place where this had seemed like a possible answer to anything. I could not get there. I am still not there. Carol came to the hospital that afternoon. Someone had called her before I could. She walked into my room with a face I had never seen on her in 41 years of marriage, something past crying, something that had gone quiet in a place where sound used to live. She sat beside me and took my hand, and we did not talk for a very long time. Eventually, she said, "What do we do?" I said I didn't know yet. She said, "Are you angry?" I thought about it honestly. I said I was something, but I was not sure anger was the right word for all of it. She nodded like that made sense to her. Denise came by that evening, off her shift, out of uniform. She stood in the doorway and said she just wanted to check in. Carol stood up and hugged her. This woman we had never met before 4 days ago. And Denise patted her back and said she was just glad she had trusted her instinct. I told Denise she had saved my life. She said she had just done what any decent person would do. I have thought about that since, about how rare it is, actually, for people to do what any decent person would do, about how easy it would have been for her to decide it was not her place, to assume she was reading too much into it, to let the charge nurse's dismissal be the end of it, about the particular kind of courage it takes to sit in a chair at 3 in the morning and tell a stranger the truth about what you have seen. Denise is not a federal investigator. She is not a hero in any cinematic sense. She is a night shift nurse who worked a double shift and paid attention when it would have been easier not to. I will be grateful to her for whatever years I have left. My daughter and son-in-law were taken into custody before the end of that week. My daughter called me once from a detention facility, 3 days after her arrest. I answered because I did not know what I would do until the phone was in my hand and her voice was on the line. She said she was sorry. She said she did not know how things had gotten this far. She said her husband had convinced her that it was the only way out, and she had been so scared, and she had not been thinking clearly, and she was sorry. She was so sorry. She needed me to know that. I listened to all of it, and then I said, "I know you're sorry." She started to cry. I said, "I love you. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I will love you every single day of mine. But love is not the same as trust, and right now I do not have the second thing to give you. I don't know if I ever will again. And I think you are going to need to sit with that, the same way I'm sitting with it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Daddy?" I said, "I know, baby." And I hung up. Carol was sitting across from me at the kitchen table. We were home by then. I had been discharged. The house was familiar around us, the ordinary light of a Tuesday afternoon coming through the windows. She watched my face when I set the phone down. She said, "How do you feel?" I said, "Tired, sad, a little surprised I'm still here to feel anything at all." She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. We sat there in the kitchen that we had cooked 10,000 meals in the house we had argued and laughed and raised a child in, and I thought about how strange it is that ordinary things can look so different after you have almost lost them. The hip was healing. The physical therapist said I was ahead of schedule. My doctor said the blood work was clear, that the substance had not done lasting damage, that I had been fortunate in the timing. I thanked him and did not say anything about what fortune looks like up close, like a young woman in worn-out sneakers deciding to trust what her eyes were telling her in the middle of the night. My son-in-law's attorney entered a plea that reduced his charges. My daughter is facing a longer process. I am told it will take time. I am told there will be hearings I may need to attend. I am told a lot of things by a lot of people who are very official and very thorough, and none of them can tell me the only thing I actually want to know, which is where in the long sequence of ordinary days did my daughter look at her father and see only a dollar amount. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it because it is the question that lives in me now, and I have not found an answer to it, and I have begun to wonder if I am not supposed to. Some things do not resolve into understanding. Some things you just carry. What I know is this. Carol is here. She made coffee this morning and burned the toast a little and complained about it in the exact tone she has complained about. Burned toast for 4 decades, and I sat at that kitchen table and felt something I can only call fierce gratitude for the smallness of it, for the ordinary, unremarkable, beautiful smallness of a Tuesday morning with the woman I love. I know that Denise is still working her shifts, still walking dark hospital corridors at 3 in the morning, still paying attention. I sent a letter to the hospital administration. I sent a separate one directly to her. I do not know if it was enough. I suspect nothing would be. I know that love, the real kind, does not calculate. It does not look at the person across the table and see what they are worth after they are gone. My wife has known this her whole life, and she never once had to explain it to me until now, when the lesson came from the hardest direction. And I know that whatever comes next, the hearings, the silence where a phone call used to be, the long work of deciding how much of a door to leave open and how much to grieve as permanently closed, I will not go through any of it alone. Carol looked up from her coffee this morning and asked what I was thinking about. I said I was thinking about how glad I was that she had pushed me to get the surgery. She raised an eyebrow and said, "I pushed you for 2 years." I said, "I know. I'm stubborn." She said, "You're impossible." And she smiled at me the way she has smiled at me for 41 years, like I am the most exhausting and irreplaceable thing in her life. And I thought, yes, this is what I almost lost. This is what I am still here for. That is enough. That is more than enough. If there is anything I want to leave with you because I have been sitting with this long enough that something has settled, it is simply this. Pay attention to the people around you. Not suspiciously, not with fear, just the way Denise paid attention, with steady eyes and enough courage to act on what they see. Pay attention to the ones who love you, because ordinary mornings are not guaranteed, and the person across the table from you with the burned toast deserves to know that you know that. And if you are carrying something heavy tonight, something you have not told anyone, some weight you have decided is yours to hold alone. I hope you find your own version of a nurse in a dark hallway who sits down beside you and tells you the truth. The world still has those people in it. I know because I met one. Share your thoughts below. I read every single one of them.